Life does not wait for you to be ready. It does not knock politely and ask if this is a good time. It arrives without warning, without mercy, and almost always at the exact moment when you feel like you are already hanging on by a thread. You know this feeling. Things were finally starting to smooth out. You were catching your breath, finding your footing, beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, the storm had passed. And then it hits. A plan falls apart. Someone you trusted lets you down. A problem appears from nowhere and lands right in the middle of everything you were trying to hold together. And in that split second, your entire body reacts. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts start spinning. Frustration rises like a wave you cannot outrun. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet voice whispers the question that haunts nearly every human being alive. Why does this always happen right now, when I can least afford it? For a long time, I believed those moments meant something was broken in my life. I thought maybe I was unlucky. Maybe I simply was not built to handle the weight life kept dropping on me. But then something shifted. I started watching people carefully. I started paying attention to how different individuals moved through the same kinds of pain, the same kinds of pressure, the same storms that would leave some people shattered and others somehow standing. And what I discovered completely changed the way I see everything. The people who seemed untouchable were not the ones who had it easy. They were the ones who had been tested the hardest. They had walked through failure. They had sat with disappointment. They had faced moments where everything they counted on collapsed without warning. And yet, there was something about them that pressure simply could not crack. They did not explode. They did not spiral. They did not let chaos swallow them whole. They moved through difficulty with a kind of stillness that felt almost impossible to explain. At first, I assumed it was just who they were. Some people are born calmer, I told myself. Some personalities are just naturally built stronger. But the more I listened, the more I reflected on my own life, the more clearly I saw the truth. Their calmness was not something they were born with. It was something they built. Quietly, gradually, through experience and intention, and 1,000 small choices made under pressure. They had learned a skill that most people never even think to develop. The skill of remaining steady when life decides to test them. Not numb, not cold, not checked out from reality, but grounded, anchored, able to face the storm without losing themselves inside it. And once you truly understand this, something powerful clicks into place. The greatest challenge in life is almost never the situation itself. The real battle is the war happening inside your own mind the moment something goes wrong. Two people can face the exact same crisis. One drowns in it. The other stays clear and finds a way through. The difference is not luck. The difference is not talent. The difference is the condition of the mind meeting that moment. This is what the ancient Stoic philosophers understood with almost frightening clarity. They believed that external events are not what destroy a person. What destroys a person is the story they tell themselves about those events. And the moment you begin training your mind to pause before it reacts, everything changes. Problems that once felt catastrophic start to feel workable. Situations that once sent you into a tailspin begin to feel smaller, more manageable, less like disasters and more like detours. You start to realize that most of what once shook your peace only had power because your mind moved too fast. And the instant you learn to slow that down, you gain something that cannot be bought or borrowed. Control, not control over the world around you. The world will always be wild and unpredictable, but control over yourself, over your thoughts, over your responses, over the way you carry yourself when everything around you is falling apart. That is one of the rarest and most powerful forms of strength a human being can ever develop. There is a pattern in life that almost everyone recognizes sooner or later, even if they cannot quite put it into words. Hard moments do not arrive when you are rested, confident, and ready. They arrive when you are already exhausted, already stretched thin, already running on whatever scraps of energy you have left. And because of that timing, those moments hit differently. They feel heavier than they actually are. Think about what happens when life is going well. A small problem appears and you handle it. You deal with it, move past it, and barely remember it happened. But when you are already under pressure, that same small problem can feel like the final blow. A simple mistake begins to feel like proof of something much darker. A minor disagreement starts to feel like betrayal. A small setback begins to feel like evidence that everything is falling apart, and nothing will ever get better. The situation itself may not have changed at all, but your internal state has. And that is one of the most critical things to understand about the way life tests you. Life rarely challenges your capabilities. Most of the time, what life is truly testing is your emotional stability. It is testing whether your mind can stay level when the ground beneath you shifts. For years, I interpreted these moments as signs that something was fundamentally wrong with my life. When multiple problems stacked on top of each other, I would assume the universe was personally organizing against me, as though existence itself had singled me out for suffering. But when I began studying how genuinely resilient people operate under pressure, I noticed something that stopped me cold. Strong people do not experience fewer problems. They simply do not pile emotional chaos on top of the problems they already have. And that single difference changes absolutely everything. Because the truth is that most of the suffering people experience in difficult moments does not come from the difficulty itself. It comes from the storm raging inside their own minds, the panic, the worst case thinking, the desperate need to fix everything immediately, the creeping fear that something irreversible is about to happen. When those reactions take over, the mind becomes deafening, and a deafening mind cannot think straight. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the obstacle in the path becomes the path itself. At first, that sentence sounds almost absurd. How can the thing blocking your way be the way forward? But when you study how real growth actually works, the meaning becomes undeniable. Patience is never developed on easy days. Emotional discipline is never forged in comfort. Strength does not appear when life cooperates with your plans. It appears when your plans fall apart and you are forced to adapt anyway. Every moment that feels like an interruption is quietly shaping something in you that smooth sailing never could. This is where most people completely misread what life is doing to them. They interpret tests as punishment. They interpret hard moments as evidence of failure or misfortune. But those moments are not punishments. They are invitations. Invitations to develop parts of the mind that comfort has never demanded. Think about someone who has never truly faced pressure. The first time something serious goes wrong, the reaction is overwhelming. Panic, overthinking, emotional flooding. But if that person keeps showing up, keeps facing challenges without running from them, something begins to shift. The reactions slow down. The spiraling becomes less automatic. The mind starts to observe before it reacts. The situation is still difficult, but the mind meeting it has grown steadier. And a steady mind sees things a panicked one simply cannot. A calm mind can spot solutions that anxiety buries. A calm mind can make decisions that emotional reactivity would ruin. This is why emotional stability is not a luxury. It is one of the most practical and powerful skills a human being can develop, not because it removes difficulty from life, but because it keeps difficulty from controlling you. And here is something worth sitting with. Many people spend their entire lives trying to build circumstances that protect them from discomfort. They avoid pressure. They dodge failure. They engineer situations designed to keep uncertainty at a safe distance. But avoiding difficulty does not build strength. It quietly destroys it, because the moment something unexpected breaks through that carefully constructed comfort, the mind has no training to meet it. But the people who build real resilience understand something different. Every frustrating moment is practice. Every unexpected problem is an opportunity to develop calm thinking. Every setback is a chance to strengthen the part of you that life most needs to be strong. And over time, something extraordinary begins to happen. The situations that once devastated you lose their grip, not because life softened, but because you deepened. You start to pause where you once exploded. You start to observe where you once spiraled. You start to respond with intention where you once reacted with impulse. And slowly, almost without realizing it, you become the kind of person that pressure cannot easily unravel. Most people believe strength looks dramatic. They picture it as force, as fire, as someone white, knuckling their way through every obstacle life throws in their direction. But real strength does not look like that at all. Real strength is quiet. It is the kind of stillness that holds steady while everything around it shakes. It is the ability to keep your mind clear when the people around you are losing theirs entirely. And most powerfully, it is the ability to remain unbothered when life decides to push back hardest. Now, that word, unbothered, gets misunderstood constantly. People hear it and picture someone cold, detached, someone who has simply stopped caring about anything. But that is not it at all. Being unbothered has nothing to do with indifference. It has everything to do with not reacting impulsively to every disturbance that crosses your path. There is a world of difference between those two things. A person who does not care avoids problems altogether. A person who remains unbothered walks directly into problems with a clear and steady mind. And that clear mind becomes one of the most decisive advantages a human being can carry. Because when pressure shows up, most people immediately lose clarity. The emotions surge in and commandeer the controls. The mind races forward into worst-case futures that have not even happened yet. The problem you are actually facing begins to feel twice its real size, then 3 times, then something enormous and inescapable. This is how stress multiplies. The event might be manageable, but the reaction becomes its own catastrophe. And once that emotional surge begins, it is almost impossible to stop. Your breathing shallows, your thoughts accelerate, your vision narrows. Psychologists call this a threat response. In that state, your brain is not trying to understand the situation. It is purely trying to survive it. And survival mode is almost never the same thing as intelligent decision making. The Stoic philosophers grasped this truth centuries before modern psychology gave it a name. They understood that suffering almost never comes from the event itself. It comes from the meaning we attach to the event. 2 people stand inside the exact same situation. One crumbles, the other stays clear and begins looking for the next step forward. The event did not change, the interpretation did. This is why emotional discipline is not just philosophically interesting. It is practically transformative. When you learn to insert a pause between the event and your response, something extraordinary appears inside that gap. Choice. Instead of reacting from habit, you begin responding from intention. Instead of letting the emotion steer, you begin watching the emotion from a slight distance. And observation does something remarkable. It weakens the emotion's grip on you. Emotions lose a stunning amount of their power the moment you simply watch them without immediately acting on them. Imagine someone criticizes you. The automatic response is defensiveness. Your mind starts loading ammunition. Your body braces. But if instead of firing back immediately, you pause for just a moment, the whole picture shifts. Maybe the criticism was exaggerated. Maybe it came from frustration that had nothing to do with you. Maybe there is something genuinely useful buried inside it. Without the pause, you never see any of those possibilities. You only experience the emotion. And emotions, moving at full speed, will always push you to react before your rational mind has had a single second to understand what is actually happening. This is why staying unbothered is not passive at all. It is an active, deliberate form of mental control. It is the practiced ability to slow the emotional reaction down long enough for clarity to surface. And once clarity arrives, most problems shrink. Resilient people feel frustration. They feel disappointment. They feel the same weight of pressure that anyone else would carry. But they do not let those feelings immediately commandeer their behavior. They pause, they breathe, they observe, and in that brief window of awareness, they reclaim control of themselves. That pause may seem insignificant, but it rewrites the outcome of entire situations. A reaction creates conflict. A pause creates understanding. A reaction pours fuel on the fire. A pause opens the door to solutions. Over time, practicing this consistently begins to rewire the mind itself. Situations that once triggered instant alarm start to feel less threatening. Your nervous system stabilizes. Your thinking becomes more deliberate. And you begin developing something that countless people desperately search for but rarely understand. Emotional resilience. Not the kind that makes life stop being hard. The kind that makes hardship stop feeling like the end of everything. There is a quiet moment that plays out in almost every difficult situation. A moment so small and fast that most people blow right past it without registering it at all. Something goes wrong. A message arrives that you did not want to receive. Someone says something that cuts. A plan collapses. And before a single conscious thought has formed, a reaction is already firing inside you. Your pulse shifts. Your mind accelerates. Your emotions rise faster than words can follow. That moment, that first emotional surge, is where enormous amounts of personal power get silently surrendered. Because when emotions move faster than awareness, they stop being feelings you experience and start becoming decisions you make. The situation no longer belongs to you. It belongs to the reaction. Think about how many conflicts trace directly back to this single dynamic. Someone says something sharp. Another person fires back without thinking. The words get harder. The voices get louder. Within seconds, a minor misunderstanding has mushroomed into a full confrontation. Not because the original issue was catastrophic, but because emotional speed outran rational thinking on both sides. What most people fail to see is that the emotion itself is not the enemy. Emotions are natural. They are signals. They are part of what it means to be human. The real problem is not the feeling. The real problem is the speed. When Emotion moves faster than awareness. It hijacks your decision making. And decisions made at emotional speed are almost always ones you will regret. You say things you did not mean to say. You interpret situations through a distorted lens. You assign intentions to people that were never there. The emotionally charged mind is a notoriously unreliable reader of reality. Psychologists describe this as the shift from the rational brain to the emotional brain. When the emotional brain assumes command, your thinking collapses inward. All you can see is the perceived threat directly in front of you. Context disappears. Nuance vanishes. You react rather than understand. This is why a single off-hand comment can feel like a personal assault. Why a small failure can suddenly feel like the defining evidence of your inadequacy. Why a temporary problem can morph in your mind into a permanent reality. The emotional mind exaggerates by design. It amplifies because it is wired to protect you. But in everyday life, that protection mechanism often does more damage than the thing it was protecting you from. Here is what makes this so fascinating, though. The emotional reaction itself, the raw initial surge, usually lasts only seconds. The real damage comes from what you do inside those seconds. If you react immediately, the emotion spills into your words and your actions and takes the wheel entirely. But if you pause, even briefly, something begins to shift. The intensity starts to soften. The rational mind slowly returns. And the same situation that felt overwhelming just moments ago begins to look different, more manageable, more workable, less like a catastrophe and more like a problem with a path through it. This is why the most emotionally grounded people you will ever encounter seem almost unhurried in high-pressure moments. They do not rush to respond. They do not scramble to fill every silence. They create space between what happens and how they answer. And inside that space, they quietly reclaim themselves. A young professional once received a late-night email from his manager. Short, blunt, pointing out multiple errors in a project he had spent weeks building. The reaction hit immediately. Anger, injustice, a burning need to defend himself right now. In his head, he was already composing the reply. Detailed, sharp, laying out exactly why the criticism was unfair and exactly what pressure he had been under. But something made him stop before he hit send. He stepped away from the screen. He walked around the room. He breathed slowly and let the storm inside him settle. When he came back and read the email again, he saw something completely different. The manager was not attacking him. The message was pointing out specific issues that genuinely needed correction. What had felt like a personal attack in the heat of the moment was simply straightforward feedback. Had he sent that first reply, the damage could have been severe. Instead, because he paused, he protected not just the professional relationship, but his own inner peace. That single pause rewrote the entire outcome. This is the power that lives inside the gap between event and response. A thin sliver of time that most people barrel right through. But inside that sliver, if you learn to find it, is where your greatest power over any situation lies. There is a rule that has quietly protected people's peace for more than 2,000 years. It came from the Stoic philosophers, and despite how simple it sounds, it holds the power to fundamentally rewire how you experience pressure. The idea is this: everything in life falls into one of two categories: what you can control and what you cannot. At first glance, that sounds almost too obvious to bother stating. Of course, some things are out of our hands. But look carefully at how most people actually live, and you will see something striking. An enormous portion of human suffering is generated by people pouring their energy into things they have zero control over. Other people's opinions, outcomes that have not happened yet, the way someone else chooses to feel or act, circumstances that are already beyond influence. And because their attention keeps circling back to these uncontrollable things, the mind never finds a resting place. It stays permanently unsettled, searching for solid ground that simply does not exist out there. The Stoics offered a completely different approach. They believed that genuine inner peace comes from one fundamental shift in attention. Stop chasing what you cannot control. Pour that energy into what you can. When you genuinely internalize this distinction, a remarkable thing happens. A significant portion of your stress loses its justification. Problems that once felt enormous suddenly reveal themselves as things you were never meant to solve. Imagine someone criticizes you publicly. Every instinct says fight back, explain yourself, force them to see things correctly. But here is the painful truth. You cannot control what story another person decides to tell about you in their mind. That territory belongs entirely to them. What you can control is your behavior, your character, your response. The moment that clarity lands, criticism transforms. Instead of trying to force a change in someone else's perception, you ask yourself a simpler and far more useful question. Is there anything valuable in what they said? If yes, you take it. If no, you set it down and walk forward without carrying unnecessary weight. The same logic applies to the future. Many people live in a quiet state of perpetual anxiety about what might go wrong. They run mental simulations of disaster. They try to mentally prepare for every possible bad outcome. But the future is not something that yields to control. It unfolds according to variables you will never fully see coming. Trying to control it completely is like trying to command the weather. You can prepare, you can adapt, but you cannot dictate how it moves. And the moment you stop fighting that truth and accept it, something liberating happens. Instead of obsessing over outcomes, you focus on preparation. Instead of drowning in what might happen, you ask, what can be done right now. Your energy stops leaking into fear and starts flowing into action. Marcus Aurelius lived this principle under conditions most of us will never face. As Emperor of Rome, he operated inside a storm of political conflict, military threat, and human unpredictability that would have broken most people completely. Yet, in his private writings, he returned again and again to a single anchor. External events are not fully within your control, but your mind always is. That belief gave him a foundation that the chaos around him could not erode. The Stoic approach does not ask you to become passive. It does not ask you to accept mistreatment or stop striving. It asks you to direct your attention strategically, to stop pouring your energy into battles that were never yours to win, to focus instead on what genuinely belongs to you: your effort, your attitude, your discipline, your ability to remain calm and think clearly even when everything around you is moving too fast. These are internal resources, and unlike external circumstances, they cannot be stolen by a bad day or an unpredictable world. Think about two people facing the same disappointment. One becomes consumed by it. They replay the event endlessly. They imagine how things should have gone differently. Their energy drains away into a loop of regret that produces nothing. The other person finds the one thing within their influence and puts their focus there. They ask, what can be improved? They adjust. They move forward. Same event, same outcome, completely different inner experience. One person stays stuck. The other steps through. This is what the Stoic rule actually protects. Not just your peace in an abstract sense, but your mental energy in a very practical one. Emotional energy is finite. If you burn it reacting to every inconvenience, every criticism, every unexpected turn, you will be exhausted before the real challenges even arrive. But when you train yourself to filter what actually deserves your energy, your mind stays cleaner. Your thinking stays sharper. Your responses stay more deliberate. And over time, you begin experiencing a kind of freedom that most people never find. You stop feeling controlled by circumstances you never had power over. The battles that once consumed you dissolve, and in their place, something opens up. Space to think with clarity, space to act with purpose, space to remain steady in exactly the moments that life tries hardest to rattle you. There is a quiet habit that guards a person's peace more reliably than almost any other. Yet, remarkably few people ever truly master it. It is the ability to stop absorbing everything as though it were directed personally at you. This might sound simple on the surface, but look honestly at any ordinary day, and you will see how completely personal interpretation shapes the emotional landscape of a person's life. Someone responds to you with a slightly sharp tone, and immediately the mind concludes they are disrespecting you. Someone does not reply to your message, and the mind leaps to they must not value me. A colleague gets recognized at work, and somewhere beneath the surface, the mind murmurs, maybe I am simply not good enough. The events themselves, in each of these cases, are essentially neutral. A tone of voice, an unanswered message, someone else's success. But the story we build around those neutral events transforms them into personal wounds. And the moment the mind decides something is personal, emotion floods in right behind it. Hurt, anger, resentment, jealousy, and suddenly your peace is gone, surrendered to something that may have had nothing to do with you at all. Here is what most people never pause long enough to consider. The vast majority of what others say and do is driven entirely by what is happening inside them. People speak from their stress, from their insecurities, from their history and their pain, and the particular mood that arrived in them that morning, which means that many things that feel like personal attacks are actually mirrors of something going on inside the other person, not reflections of your worth or your character. Consider this. Imagine someone cuts you off in traffic. The automatic reaction is often instant anger. That person is reckless and disrespectful. But if you slow down for just a second and consider other possibilities, the picture changes. Maybe they are rushing to a hospital. Maybe they are distracted by devastating news. Maybe they are simply having the worst day of their life and are not thinking clearly. None of that makes the behavior acceptable, but it reveals something important. The event almost certainly had nothing to do with you personally. The mind just insisted on making it about you. Epictetus, one of the most powerful Stoic voices in history, said that people are not disturbed by events themselves, but by the judgments they place on those events. That insight sounds simple until you sit with its full weight. If our judgments are generating most of our emotional disturbance, then changing those judgments can fundamentally change our entire experience of living. The moment you shift from asking, "Why are they attacking me?" to asking, "What might this person be experiencing right now?" the emotional landscape transforms. Defensiveness gives way to curiosity. Resentment softens toward understanding. And sometimes you discover that the harsh thing someone said reveals far more about their internal struggles than it does about you. Not taking things personally also protects you from one of the most exhausting psychological traps that exists: the assumption that the world is constantly commenting on you. In reality, most people are almost entirely absorbed in their own lives, their own fears, their own ambitions, their own stories. Understanding that can feel strangely freeing. It means that a significant portion of what you have been experiencing as personal judgment is actually just other people navigating their own internal weather. When you stop interpreting everything as a message aimed at you, the emotional weight of daily life drops dramatically. And something else shifts too. When you take things personally, you hand other people the remote control to your emotional state. A single comment can poison your entire day. A careless remark can take up residence in your head for hours. A criticism can quietly undermine your confidence for days afterward. In that arrangement, your inner peace is only as stable as the behavior of everyone around you. And people are wildly, unpredictably human. They have bad days. They act impulsively. They say things they did not fully mean. If your equilibrium depends on them behaving perfectly, you will spend the majority of your life feeling disrupted. But when you genuinely learn to stop taking everything personally, other people's words lose their ability to commandeer your emotions. You listen more openly. You evaluate situations with greater accuracy. You respond thoughtfully instead of defensively. Your presence becomes calmer, and that calm changes how others engage with you. Conversations become more honest. Conflicts resolve more quickly. Misunderstandings untangle more easily. Your stability begins to function as an invitation to the better version of every interaction. Perhaps the deepest change happens internally, though. You feel lighter. The constant weight of replaying conversations, analyzing every word someone said, searching for hidden meanings in innocent interactions. All of that begins to lift. Your mind grows quieter. And in that quiet, you discover energy you had been hemorrhaging into emotional reactions that never needed to happen. Energy that is now free for the things that actually matter. Calmness is almost universally misunderstood. Most people encounter someone who remains composed under pressure and assume that person was simply born that way. They tell themselves some people are naturally calm and some people are naturally reactive, as though temperament is destiny. But that belief is not just wrong. It is quietly limiting, because it removes from your hands the very thing that is most available to you. Calmness is not a personality trait you either have or you do not. It is a trained ability. It is a skill developed exactly the way any physical skill is developed, through consistent practice, repeated over time, refined through experience. The people who hold steady during storms did not arrive that way by accident. They learned how to guide their minds instead of being guided by their emotions. And the process begins with a single realization that sounds almost too simple to be powerful. Your mind does not have to react to everything immediately. When pressure appears, the default is to move fast, respond instantly, fix it now. The brain in a stressed state wants urgency. It interprets speed as safety. But speed almost always feeds the emotional reaction rather than resolving it. Slowing down interrupts that pattern entirely. Picture a difficult conversation. Someone says something that triggers you. Your mind immediately starts loading the response. The words form before the thought is even fully conscious. The urge to defend yourself feels almost physical. But the difference between reacting and responding may live in just a few seconds. And Those seconds, when you actually use them, are extraordinary. The pause gives your breathing room to change. It gives your thoughts room to reorganize. It gives the emotional intensity room to begin dropping. And suddenly, you have access to a version of your mind that was completely unavailable to you a moment ago. Emotionally disciplined people practice this deliberately. They slow their speech. They slow their reactions. They give themselves the time to understand what is actually happening before they decide what to do about it. And that small change produces a shift in mental functioning that is hard to overstate. When your nervous system is calm, your brain operates with breadth. You notice what you would otherwise miss. You consider possibilities that stress would have buried. You think strategically rather than defensively. But when the nervous system is overwhelmed, the mind collapses into a narrow tunnel, impulsive, rigid, reactive, seeing only the threat directly in front of it. One of the simplest and most powerful tools for interrupting this cycle is deliberate breathing. When stress hits, breathing becomes shallow and fast almost immediately. That signals the body that danger is real and close, which triggers the nervous system to escalate its response. But when you consciously slow your breath, you send the opposite signal. You tell the body the situation is manageable. The nervous system begins to settle. The mind begins to clear. Soldiers use this before combat. Athletes use it before competition. Performers use it before walking onto a stage, because they understand that when the body stays calm, the mind can stay sharp. Another dimension of mental training is observation. Rather than immediately fusing with whatever emotion appears, you practice watching it. This is a subtle shift, but it changes everything. Instead of thinking I am angry, you notice anger is here right now. Instead of thinking I am overwhelmed, you notice overwhelm is present. That small linguistic distance creates psychological space. You are no longer inside the emotion looking out. You are watching it from just outside. And from that vantage point, the emotion's authority over your behavior begins to loosen. It still exists, but it no longer runs the show. Over time, this habit fundamentally reshapes your relationship with difficulty. Situations that once detonated emotional reactions begin to feel less explosive. Your mind grows familiar with the feeling of emotional waves and learns, through experience, that they always pass. You begin trusting your ability to remain functional during discomfort. And that trust changes everything about how you approach life. Instead of dreading pressure, you begin approaching it with something closer to curiosity. You start noticing patterns in your reactions. You identify where your triggers live. And with that awareness, those triggers progressively lose their power over you. There is another layer to this that transforms the experience of difficulty itself. It comes from changing how you interpret challenges in the first place. Most people, automatically and unconsciously, interpret problems as threats. Something went wrong. Something might go badly. Something could spiral beyond control. But not every challenge is a threat. Many challenges are simply information. They reveal where more preparation is needed. They show where assumptions were wrong. They point toward where adaptation is necessary. When you begin reading challenges as information rather than danger, your emotional response to them shifts from panic toward curiosity, from frustration toward analysis, from reaction toward problem solving. Pressure becomes a signal for focused attention rather than a trigger for fear. Setbacks become feedback rather than evidence of failure. Difficult conversations become opportunities for clarity rather than landmines to survive. And as you practice these habits consistently, your mind grows progressively harder to disturb. Situations that once produced anxiety start to feel manageable. Emotional reactions slow down. Thinking becomes more deliberate. And people around you begin noticing something different in your presence. A steadiness, a composure, a groundedness that communicates itself without a word being spoken. There is something revealing about the way human beings respond to comfort. When life is easy, almost everyone looks strong. When circumstances cooperate, almost everyone appears confident. When things unfold according to plan, almost everyone seems composed and capable. But comfort has a deceptive quality. It conceals the actual structure of a person's mind. It hides what is truly there beneath the surface. Because it is only when the ground shifts that we find out what we are actually built from. Pressure is brutally honest. A peaceful day will never reveal your patience. A successful moment will never measure your resilience. But a sudden failure will. An unexpected loss will. A disappointment you never saw coming will expose in seconds what years of comfortable living managed to hide completely. In those moments, the mind responds automatically, and those automatic responses are the most honest thing about a person. Some people collapse. Some people explode outward. Some people disappear into blame or denial. But others do something entirely different. They pause. They breathe. They look honestly at what is in front of them. And then they begin moving again. That difference is not accidental. Character is not forged during comfort. Character is revealed during difficulty, and then, if you let it, slowly built there too. Look closely at the people you most respect. Not the ones who got everything handed to them, but the ones who built something real from the raw material of difficulty. If you trace their stories backward, you will almost always find the same pattern. They did not become strong because life accommodated them. They became strong because life demanded more from them than they thought they could give. And in answering that demand, they discovered something in themselves that ease never would have uncovered. This is the hidden gift inside difficult moments. At the time they arrive, they feel anything but like gifts. They feel unfair. they feel overwhelming. Sometimes they feel genuinely unbearable. But looking back from the other side of them, most people say the same thing. That was when I actually grew. That was when something real was built in me. That was when I became someone I did not know I could be. Difficulty alone does not automatically produce strength. Plenty of people are broken by hard experiences and never recover. What creates strength is not the difficulty itself. It is what you choose to do with the difficulty. The same event, the same failure, the same loss can produce two completely opposite outcomes depending entirely on the interpretation applied to it. One person meets failure and decides it is proof they are not capable. They pull back. They grow more cautious. They begin unconsciously avoiding anything that carries the possibility of a similar outcome. Another person meets the exact same failure and treats it as data. They ask what went wrong, what can be improved, what did this reveal that I could not have seen any other way? That approach transforms failure from a conclusion into an education, and education compounds. Every lesson strengthens future judgment. Every adaptation expands future capability. There is a specific mental shift that occurs when you begin genuinely seeing difficulty as training rather than punishment. Stressful moments become chances to practice emotional discipline. Uncertainty becomes practice for patience. Conflict becomes practice for calm communication. The lens through which you view what happens to you changes entirely. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is this teaching me?" And that question alone can completely alter the emotional experience of the moment. Frustration softens into curiosity. Resistance gives way to a form of acceptance. And acceptance allows the mind to stay clear and keep working instead of shutting down in protest. This is what pressure actually does to people who are paying attention. It removes the illusions that comfort maintains. When nothing is going wrong, it is easy to believe you are patient. Easy to tell yourself you are disciplined. Easy to assume you would handle crisis with grace. But those are theories. Theories that have never been tested. The moment real pressure arrives, theory meets reality, and the gap between who you imagined you were and who you actually are in that moment is where the real opportunity lies. Not as something to feel ashamed of, but as precise feedback about where growth is still waiting. Every difficult moment becomes a measurement, a reading of where your emotional training currently stands. And with awareness comes the ability to improve. There comes a point, reached only through consistent work on the mind, where something fundamental shifts in how a person moves through the world. The changes are gradual at first, barely noticeable from the outside. A pause that appears before a reaction that would have come automatically before. An emotion observed rather than acted upon. A moment of pressure met with thought rather than impulse. These adjustments look minor in isolation, but compounded across time, they begin reshaping something much deeper. They begin changing the entire relationship a person has with life itself. Most people live in a near constant state of being pushed around by circumstances. A comment lands and shifts their mood. A setback chips at their confidence. A stressful day topples their sense of stability. Their inner state rises and falls in direct response to whatever the world does around them. When life is generous, they feel good. When life becomes difficult, they feel overwhelmed. In this arrangement, peace is perpetually conditional. It depends on the world behaving in a way it almost never does for any sustained period of time. And the mind in this arrangement is always vulnerable, always just one unexpected event away from losing its footing. This is why emotional discipline is not merely a nice quality to have. It is the foundation of a life that does not depend on everything going right in order to feel livable. Instead of waiting for the world to become easier, you become stronger from within. And that internal strength gradually transforms the entire texture of how difficulty feels. Imagine two people facing the same period of genuine uncertainty. A career in transition, a financial setback, a sudden disruption to plans they had counted on. The first person moves immediately into anxiety. Worst case scenarios start playing like a film they cannot turn off. Their mind gets tangled in speculation and catastrophizing, burning energy on fears that have not happened and may never happen. The second person experiences the same uncertainty, but responds differently. They acknowledge it without minimizing it. They feel the discomfort without drowning in it. And rather than spiraling into speculation, they focus on what can actually be done right now. They take action where action is possible. They accept uncertainty where control genuinely does not exist. Same situation, completely different internal worlds. One person feels powerless, the other feels capable. This is what it actually means to become someone life cannot easily shake. Not someone who avoids difficulty, not someone who never feels stress or loss or disappointment, but someone whose foundation holds even when those experiences arrive. Someone whose mind remains oriented and functional even in the middle of disorder. The bedrock of this stability is a simple but profound acceptance. Life is not going to consistently cooperate with your plans. Difficulty is not an interruption to life's natural order. It is part of the natural order. When you stop expecting otherwise, when you stop treating every hard moment as a violation of how things should be, the emotional response to challenges changes entirely. They stop feeling like personal offenses and start feeling like natural terrain. And because of that, your mind can meet them without collapsing into protest. Something else develops alongside this stability, something quieter and equally powerful. A confidence that is entirely different from the kind that depends on success. Success-based confidence is fragile by nature. It requires the winds to keep coming. The moment something goes wrong, it wobbles. But resilience-based confidence is built from a completely different material. It comes from the accumulated evidence of having faced hard things and remained standing, from having been genuinely tested and discovering that you did not break, from having moved through difficulty and found yourself on the other side still capable of moving forward. That kind of confidence does not require perfection. It does not require life to keep delivering favorable outcomes. It is sourced from within, and because of that, it holds steady when the external world does not. People who carry this kind of grounded presence are unmistakable. They do not announce themselves loudly. They are often not the most dramatic or the most outwardly expressive people in a room, but when pressure arrives, something in them becomes immediately visible. While others react emotionally, they remain thoughtful. While others rush into impulsive responses, they pause, observe, and then move with intention. Their composure is not performed. It cannot be faked. It is the visible result of 1,000 previous moments in which they chose the harder internal path, chose patience when reaction would have been easier, chose observation when emotion was pushing hard for control, chose to protect their inner peace over the temporary satisfaction of an impulsive response. Each of those choices compounded. They reshaped habits. They reshaped patterns of thinking. They rewired the automatic responses that had once felt unavoidable. And, gradually, without drama, they rewrote the identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who gets overwhelmed. You begin experiencing yourself as someone who stays composed, someone who can be trusted in difficulty, someone who finds a way through when the path is not clear. Identity influences behavior more powerfully than almost anything else. When the story you carry about yourself includes steadiness and resilience, your actions begin moving toward that story naturally. The mind follows the map it is given about who you are. And perhaps the most quietly profound part of this entire transformation is the freedom it brings. You stop being governed by every small disturbance. A criticism does not commandeer your day. An unexpected delay does not generate disproportionate frustration. A disagreement does not escalate into a consuming emotional event. Your energy becomes something you protect and deploy intentionally. Your reactions become something you choose rather than something that happens to you. Your mind grows quieter, and in that quietness, something becomes available that noise had been keeping at bay all along. Clarity, real clarity about situations, about people, about what actually matters and what does not. Because a mind no longer clouded by constant emotional turbulence sees the world as it actually is, not as anxiety and reactivity have distorted it. Before we close, I want you to sit with something simple for a moment. Life is going to keep testing you. That is not a maybe. That is a certainty. There will be more moments when things fall apart unexpectedly. More moments when people fail to show up in the ways you needed. More moments when pressure arrives without warning and catches you in exactly the wrong state. For a long time, many of us carry the belief that peace will come when those moments finally stop coming. That one day, if we can just get everything arranged correctly, life will settle into something predictable enough that we can finally relax. But the truth, learned slowly and sometimes painfully, is that peace has never lived out there in the circumstances. Peace lives in a mind that has learned how to face those circumstances without losing its balance. If one idea from this stays with you, let it be this: the real battle in life is not with the world around you. It is with the reactions inside you. The world will remain unpredictable. Circumstances will keep shifting. People will keep behaving in ways beyond your control. But the one territory where your influence never expires is your own mind, your thoughts, your responses, your capacity to pause when every instinct is screaming to react, your ability to remain grounded when everything around you is churning. That capacity may appear small, but it is one of the most transformative forces available to a human being. Because when you govern your reactions, you govern the direction of your life. A calm mind does not just feel better, it operates better. It makes decisions that an anxious mind would ruin. It sees possibilities that a stressed mind would overlook. It conserves energy that an impulsive mind would burn on things that never deserved it. And it allows you to move through life with something genuinely rare: dignity, clarity, the quiet, unshakable presence of someone who has decided that their peace is worth protecting. That does not mean caring less. It means having more of yourself available for what actually matters. When you are no longer consumed by constant reactivity, the energy that was being swallowed by emotional turbulence becomes available for growth, for creativity, for the relationships and pursuits that give life genuine depth. The people who develop this kind of internal stability share something in common. They are not always the loudest voices in the room. They are not always the most visibly impressive. But when things get hard, they become undeniable. While others panic, they stay present. While others react, they observe. While others make decisions they will regret, they take one breath and choose differently. If you begin practicing what was explored here, you will start noticing something changing inside you. The situations that once reliably irritated you will begin to matter less. The moments that once triggered you will begin to lose their grip more quickly. Your mind will grow more spacious, more patient, more capable of seeing beyond the immediate noise. And over time, something remarkable will settle in. The same life that once felt like it was constantly overwhelming, you will begin to feel like something you can actually navigate. Not because life got easier, because you got stronger inside of it. You cannot control every situation that finds you. You cannot command every outcome. You cannot make every person behave in the way that serves your peace. But you can control how you meet what comes. You can meet it with patience, with awareness, with the practiced discipline of someone who has decided that their inner state is not for sale to every passing disturbance. And every single time you make that choice, you strengthen the foundation beneath your feet, little by little, moment by moment, until the ground you stand on no longer shakes so easily. Life will keep testing you, but those tests will no longer define your peace, because the greatest strength you will ever develop is not the power to bend the world to your will. It is the power to remain steady within it, no matter what the world decides to do.